the move, and the clubs were looking to do some big business ahead of that transfer show at 7 tonight. Manchester United, the expectation is there could be a lot going on there, obviously, with the manager and the players. Midfield seems to be an area that they will be targeting. A couple of players linked. We've seen Baleba at Brighton, we've seen Ederson at Forest, Tonali at Newcastle. Of those, which one would be the best bet for Manchester United, or is another you think would suit?
I mean, I've always been a big fan of Baleba. I think he's been a bright young talent, hasn't he? And I don't think he's featured as much as what I've seen previous seasons, where he's been one of them that's been a real standout player for me. I mean, I've seen a worldie of a goal. Yeah, I think I was actually commentating on the game for that, and it's not just that about his game, it's his all-round sort of position where he plays, where I think they're going to lose Casemiro, aren't they? So they're going to be looking for someone like with obviously probably more youth on their side. So for me, it'd be Ederson all day. Yeah, I just think that from what I've seen of him in a Forest shirt, he's been absolutely outstanding. I mean, at times he's carried Forest, even when things have been tough, and you're sort of looking at a player who can stand out and try and give him that drive and give him something to really go after, and he's just been brilliant. I just love the fact that since even he's put an England shirt on, he's really stepped up to the mark, hasn't he? And that just shows the signs of a great player, and what pass that is from midfield.
He won't come cheap though, will he?
No, he won't come cheap, and that's the thing, Jules, is that I think you're looking at these players, and you throw Tonali into the equation. At this day and age, and that quality and calibre of player that you're looking at in them three, you've got to be talking 80 to 100 million, haven't you? Because of the quality. I mean, Tonali, he's been outstanding in a Newcastle shirt, and there's talks of obviously him maybe going back to Italy. I think his head could be turned quite easily, and by the looks of what Manchester United are doing, you do feel like they are turning a huge corner, aren't they? Since Carrick's given them that belief, and where they're on this run at the moment. But for me, Elliot Anderson is an outstanding player, and I think he'd be, for me in a Manchester United shirt, I think it'd be an outstanding signing. I really do, for so many reasons. His all-round game, I actually put him as close as to a Steven Gerrard of the new era. He's got that bite, he's got that quality on the football, and he can score goals as well. So for me, Anderson would be a great fit for Manchester United.
Newcastle United fans will be desperate to see them hold on to the likes of Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes. It will also be interesting this summer in Newcastle in terms of the sort of step back they've had this season, where they are in the league. It's what they do up front with the striker situation, because obviously...
I just want to talk to you, Alan, firstly. Does it feel like Manchester United are back at the top table, or indeed did they ever leave, but they've got a bit more bargaining power to get in the best players?
They definitely left the top table for a period. There's no doubt about that. Even with the history that they had, it was looking like they was on a downward spiral. I mean, when Amorim left, to say, if they'd have asked me to go in there and say, you got to get us Champions League football, I said, I think that's highly unlikely with what I've got here. Michael Carrick has done an unbelievable job, and Steve in there, the coach, they've done they've got that turned around. They've had tremendous results, and Michael will be feeling it now. And just listening to those transfer rumours. Will he be part of the conversation? I'm guessing he will be, because of the success he's had. If he hadn't had success, he might not have been part of those conversations. So if he's got gets his hands and paws on the decision, I would suggest you would look for somebody perhaps like himself, which would make sense. Yeah. Because that creative, cultural kind of player that he was, first touch, opening up the pitch, etc., will be massively important for United. I see them Friday night, and Manu and Casemiro were excellent. I'm not exactly sure what Manu is at the moment. I think he's still trying to find his way. But if you looked at a couple of them options there, Tonali for sure would get in that team. But he'd get in that team as a number 8. Anderson, I slightly disagree with the reporter there, in that I think he's a 6. He's the top interceptor in the Premier League by some distance. He reads the game so well. He's brilliant for Spurs on Sunday. So, they are the type of players that would fit that Man United model. With Casemiro going, there's an opportunity for somebody, and I'm just so really proud of Michael and what he's done there. It's remarkable the position they're in with 8 games to go, or 7, whatever it is.
Yeah, and that. Sorry, go on.
Vicky, if there was ever a question about Manchester United's pulling power, it was answered last summer. I mean, I'm obviously talking about Newcastle because I feel like I'm qualified to talk about it. They went for Brian Mbeumo. He chose Manchester United. They liked Matthias Cunha. He went to Manchester United. They got all the way down the line with Benjamin Sesko. He went to Manchester United. Without Champions League football, and Newcastle had that. So they still do have that pulling power. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do this summer when they potentially have Champions League football in the locker as well. And it's amazing to see all these players, young players, you know, who Manchester United might not have been what we thought might not have been a huge thing for them as it came through the ranks. Clearly they are, and that is why they chose to go there last summer, and they're probably going to get Champions League football next season.
Well, probably. It looks nailed on, doesn't it? Because the other teams don't seem to want it. With all the defeats that Liverpool and Chelsea are picking up, they look nailed on for third place, don't they, in Champions League?
Man United are always going to be top of an agenda because of the status of the football club. But that doesn't mean to say that if they hadn't made Champions League football, that would slowly dissipate, and it would. It would. As we've seen with Leeds United, you know, what's happened to them over the years when they were so close to winning the Premier League, etc., etc. I think Man United have got themselves in an excellent position. I don't think the Newcastle players, and I think Eddie's been quite strong about defending Gomes and Tonali in particular, because I'm not sure that transfer would be possible. I think Newcastle got the financial power to hold off, but it'd be interesting. That could be something you'll be looking forward to.
Yeah. Look, I think there's a chance one could go of the two. I don't think both will be allowed to go. What Newcastle don't want is a repeat of last season when Alexander Isak dug his heels in, essentially went on strike. He went on strike.
Can they prevent that? Because they've got a bit of a blueprint of how to behave and how to behave and getting what you want.
Yeah, well, what I mean by that is I think that if a player agitates to leave, or if a player says, look, I do want to try explore a new opportunity, I think they will be more open to it earlier on in the transfer window. Now, I know it's difficult in a World Cup year that Mark touches on, but I think they got their fingers burnt a bit last year, and they won't allow that to happen again. Yes, they want the true value of the player, but they don't want a situation where they're wheeling and dealing in the last day of the window, and then for Newcastle it bled into this season. There was a knock-on effect, and there was a cloud hanging over the club at the start of the season, and I think that was being reflected in results and performances and a general mood, and what is going to probably be their overall finish in the league. So with regards to Bruno Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali, I would say of the two, Sandro Tonali probably more likely to leave. However, he's contracted until 2030. So, you know, Newcastle could command a huge amount of money for him. But unless any player agitates to leave, Newcastle will be keen to hold on to them. I think with Bruno Guimaraes, and he's kind of been mentioned less in paper talk and whatnot, and I think with him, Newcastle as a football club and as a city, it's got under his skin. And Alan, you know what Newcastle's like in a place having managed up there, and when it does that to certain individuals and players, they find it hard to leave, and that's why I think him at 28 is more likely to stay of the two. I'm not saying Sandro Tonali definitely will go, but if I'm looking into a crystal ball, I think Tonali probably more likely.
Let's get to Manchester United. They're in the market for a number of positions, aren't they, when the transfer window opens in the summer. Let's go live to our reporter, Daniel Kahn. Always lovely to see you, Dan. Look, what is Manchester United's main priority, would you say?
Yeah, afternoon, Vicky. It might not come as much of a surprise to you, but it is the midfield. After this resurgence under Michael Carrick, quite incredible over the last few months, when you consider they were 6th in January, quite a few points off a Champions League position. They now found themselves 3rd and quite a bit ahead of the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea, trying to chase them down. Now they are preparing for a return to European football next season. That does look like it is Champions League football, which means they need to expand their squad, but look to reinforce it as well. And midfield is the priority. What I can tell you from my understanding, the latest on that, is they still continue to have strong interest in trying to bring a 6 and an 8. Let's talk about the 8 first, and Elliot Anderson pretty much is top of that list. Now, from the Nottingham Forest side and from the player perspective, we understand that he won't be really considering his future until after the World Cup. If it looks very likely as it is, he'll be selected for Thomas Tuchel's side. Why is that? Well, he's part of a relegation relegation fight with Nottingham Forest, so he's incredibly focused on that. But Manchester United, he would be their ideal number 8. We've seen how impressive he has been this season. Whether they can get that over the line this summer after the World Cup, Manchester City also strong contenders for him. From Manchester United's perspective, they're not going to want to lose another player to Manchester City. Antoine Semenyo picked them in January, so that's very interesting to watch. Other 8 in that position might be the likes of Adam Wharton at Crystal Palace to look out for as well. You look at the number 6 position with Casemiro leaving the club in the summer with his contract expiring. They need someone to replace those defensive qualities the Brazilian brings to the team, and I think ideally that is Carlos Baleba of Brighton. United had strong interest in him last summer. We also reported in January they made tentative inquiries around his availability. Now, it's interesting what Mark, Keith and Alan were talking about in terms of transfers in a World Cup year. Manchester United, remember, got Matheus Cunha sealed, signed, delivered well before the transfer window even opened last season because of his release clause. They were able to get some business done quite early on, and maybe with Baleba not involved in the World Cup with Cameroon, and also just maybe with a dip in his performance this year, perhaps his value was arguably lowered a little bit as well. So maybe Manchester United will be really interested in trying to negotiate a lower fee with Brighton, get that deal earlier done in the window. Also have to talk about Sandro Tonali. He's been in the news quite a lot in the last week or so. Now, Keith makes a great point. Whether this is from an agent perspective, whether Newcastle make Champions League football or not, what I can tell you is, again, he's very high up on the Manchester United list of midfielders. Now, whether that is something in the action in the summer, we will wait and see, but he certainly does have his admirers at Old Trafford in the summer. I'll just lastly say, definitely agree with Alan Pardew. Having covered Wolves a little bit in the last few years, João Gomez, I would be looking at him if I'm any top club in the Premier League. I think he is a brilliant midfielder, and maybe not seeing the best of him this year with Wolves struggling in the Premier League, but he is definitely someone who I think would be a really good option for a lot of top clubs to look at.
Yeah, no doubt he'll have plenty of suitors. Right, what about the left-back area? Is that where they want to strengthen as well?
Yeah, absolutely is, Vic. And let me just give you some context to this. With, again, as I mentioned, a return to European football looking ever more likely next season, they need options in different positions, of course. And you look at the left-back area, maybe something we haven't talked about a lot this year, with Luke Shaw really returning to some sort of fitness, being consistently fit. That's been great for him and for Manchester United, but he's also out of contract next summer. Terrell Malacia, another option, pretty much the backup option in that position for United this season. He runs out of his contract. His contract expires this summer, and it looks very likely he is to leave Old Trafford then as well. So Manchester United need to look long-term at those options. I know the likes of Nathaniel Brown at Eintracht Frankfurt is someone they're keeping very close tabs on, but also perhaps a new name to talk about, and I'm sure Keith can shed some more light on, is, from my understanding, Lewis Hall is also on Manchester United's list. He's of course had a very impressive season. He's been called up by England as well. Again, I'm not saying that Manchester United are maybe going to get that move done or even try and bid for him this summer, but he's certainly someone who's impressed at Old Trafford and someone United are long admirers of as well.
Tensions are rising at Manchester United as club legends Roy Keane and Garry Neville have lifted the lid on what could be one of the most dramatic midfield rebuilds in recent years. With performances falling short of expectations and consistency still a major issue, the message from inside the club is becoming clear: a change is coming, and it's coming fast. Speaking in recent discussions, both Keane and Neville didn't hold back in their assessment of United's current midfield options. They pointed to a lack of control, energy, and tactical discipline as key reasons why the team has struggled in big moments this season. For Keane, the issue is deeper than just form, it's about identity. He emphasized that United's midfield no longer dominates games the way it once did, calling for serious reinforcements if the club wants to compete at the highest level again. Neville echoed those concerns, suggesting that the recruitment strategy must now focus on players who can dictate tempo, break lines, and bring physical presence. According to emerging reports, United are already lining up a trio of exciting midfield targets that could redefine the heart of the team. One of the standout names on the radar is Carlos Baleba. The young and dynamic midfielder has impressed with his athleticism, ball-winning ability, and composure under pressure. Seen as a long-term investment, Baleba could bring the kind of energy and defensive solidity United have been lacking. Another intriguing option is Ederson, often referred to as Anderson in some reports. Known for his versatility and powerful runs from midfield, he offers a blend of defensive grit and attacking drive. his ability to transition play quickly could be vital in modernising United's midfield structure. Perhaps the biggest name linked with the move is Sandro Tonali. Despite a turbulent period in his career, Tonali remains one of the most technically gifted midfielders in Europe. His vision, passing range, and tactical intelligence make him an ideal candidate to orchestrate play from deep, something United have sorely missed since their peak years. The idea of bringing in all three players signals more than just squad depth, it points to a complete midfield overhaul. It suggests that the club is ready to move on from underperforming options and build a new core capable of competing both domestically and in Europe. For fans, this potential rebuild brings a mix of excitement and uncertainty. A midfield revamp of this scale could take time to gel, but if executed correctly, it could mark the beginning of a new era at Old Trafford. With voices like Keane and Neville pushing for urgency and ambition, the pressure is now firmly on the club's hierarchy to deliver. The summer transfer window could define the next chapter of Manchester United's journey, and if these links are anything to go by, it's shaping up to be nothing short of massive.